The helicopter's engines roared as it tried to pass through the wall of gray clouds. Inside, the pilot gripped the controls, straining to see anything through the window. He was flying blind. There was only one thing for it. He had to climb. Suddenly, a hillside appeared out of the mist. The helicopter slammed into it, erupting in a fireball and killing all on board, including an NBA legend. Kobe Bryant woke early on the morning of Sunday, the 26th of January, 2020. While he was a devout Catholic who would normally go to church every Sunday, today was different. He and his daughter Gianna had to be at the John Wayne Airport to catch a 9 a.m. helicopter flight. He didn't have time to attend Mass that morning, but he did have time to pray. As the local priest prepared for the 7 a.m. Mass, he ran into Kobe, who had a small amount of holy water on his forehead. After exchanging a few words, Kobe headed home to pick up Gianna and then on to John Wayne Airport. The reason for their flight that day was because of a basketball tournament at the Mamba Sports Academy, owned by Bryant. The tournament was a 2-day-long event, and Gianna's team, the Mamba Ballers, were due to headline the day's games. Thousand Oaks was roughly an 80-mile drive from Kobe's in Newport Beach. The route went through some of the most congested roads in the country and took at least 2 hours to complete. The helicopter ride would take roughly 30 to 40 minutes and avoid any lengthy tailbacks. And on today's trip, there would be more than just the Bryants on board. As they arrived at the airport, 2 of Gianna's teammates were already waiting, Alyssa Altobelli and Peyton Chester, along with their parents, John and Carrie Altobelli and Sarah Chester. Also among the group was Christina Mauser, an assistant coach for the Mamba Ballers. As the families chatted, on the tarmac, the helicopter was being prepped for takeoff. Piloted by Ara Zobayan, the helicopter was a 1991 Sikorsky S-76B owned by Island Express, a charter company that's offered rides throughout Orange County and the surrounding areas. At 9:06 a.m., after Zobayan had completed his pre-flight checklists, the party were given the clearance for takeoff. Due to poor weather conditions, Zobayan couldn't take his normal route, which was like a straight shot over the Hollywood Hills to Thousand Oaks. Instead, he was going to follow some of the major highways in the area. Going from Newport Beach, he followed I-5 to the northwest at a speed of about 150 knots. During this leg, he changed his altitude between 500 feet and 950 feet to avoid the area's mountainous terrain. At 9:20, Zobayan contacted the air traffic control at Burbank Airport, requesting clearance through their airspace. But because of an incoming craft, Zobayan circled in a holding pattern just outside of the airport until getting clearance. However, he asked a question that would be a harbinger of things to come. He asked the air traffic controller for a cloud tops report. This information, which comes out in the daily weather report, describes how high clouds are that day. Visibility that day had been around 3 miles, but looked to be decreasing to around 1 to 2 miles in some areas. Flying above the clouds would be a way to avoid the decreased visibility. At 9:32, Zobayan received clearance and the helicopter continued north. It continued to follow I-5 until entering Van Nuys airspace at 9:35. Zobayan intended to follow U.S. Route 101 that would end at the Camarillo Airport, a 20-minute drive from the Mamba Sports Academy. After banking to the south, Zobayan advised the Van Nuys Air Traffic Control that he was flying using visual flight rules and was dropping his altitude to around 500 feet to stay below the clouds. This would prevent Zobayan from flying into foul weather, which would severely reduce his visibility. By going low, he avoided flying solely by instrument flight rules, where a pilot relies on what their aircraft is telling them versus what they can see out the window. This was not authorized by either the FAA or Island Express. However, the conditions were getting worse by the minute. A camera caught a glimpse of the helicopter as it flew over US 101 and into a giant wall of clouds. It was the last image captured before the disaster. Zobayan radioed air traffic control that he was going to start his climb to get above the cloud layers. Zobayan pulled back on the controls, beginning an aggressive rate of ascent. The helicopter went from 470 feet above the ground to 1,600 feet in just over 30 seconds. Suddenly, and without warning, the helicopter began increasing speed and banking hard to the left away from the highway. Noticing something was wrong, air traffic control radioed Zobayan, asking what his intentions were. Zobayan responded that he was climbing to 4,000 feet, but the helicopter was descending rapidly. As the helicopter hurtled toward the ground, a mountain biker watched in horror. He screamed at the pilot to pull up. His cries were drowned out by the screech of the engines. Seconds later, the hillside erupted in a huge fireball. The 911 call came within seconds. At first, the sheriff's office and fire department only knew that a helicopter had crashed due to several eyewitnesses. By the time the fire department arrived on the scene, it was too late. There were no survivors. Within 2 hours, TMZ broke the story that Kobe Bryant and the other passengers were dead, sparking the first controversy of the tragedy. But how a tabloid found out about Kobe's death first would be one of many conspiracy theories surrounding Kobe's death. One of the prevailing theories is that someone must have sabotaged the helicopter. Zobayan was an experienced pilot with nearly 9,000 hours of flight time, including 2,000 hours in that particular helicopter. Added to that, Island Express had no reported accidents, so there was nothing on the surface that led investigators to believe there was something nefarious about the flight, but they would only truly know by examining the wreckage. The investigators spent several days collecting all the pieces of the wreckage from the Calabasas hillside, and what they found was surprising. The first thing that was ruled out was the possibility of the helicopter running out of fuel. This was due to the huge fireball and extensive thermal damage across the crash site. Next, the investigators looked at possible damage to the rotors or engines. However, they found nothing that would suggest rotor damage or engine failure. But what if the issue wasn't the helicopter and something happened to the people on board? After recovering the bodies, which resulted in another scandal for the LA County Sheriff's Office, when they took and shared photos of the victims' remains, the police brought them to the coroner's office for a full autopsy. In all 9 of the deceased, the medical examiner ruled that blunt force trauma from the crash caused their deaths. Additionally, the coroner also tested the pilot's remains for any signs of drugs or alcohol, which came back negative. Suspicion then turned to the pilot. According to some theories, Kobe had made enemies in Big Pharma in his legal battle over his nickname Black Mamba. A large pharmaceutical company named High Tech Pharmaceuticals apparently owned the trademark on Black Mamba for a diet supplement pill. Kobe was in litigation over the name of this product. Some speculated that Zobayan was an inside guy hired to take out Kobe so the courts would drop the case. But as far-fetched as that seems, is there even a grain of truth to it? Zobayan was hired by Island Express in 2011. Over the years, the already experienced pilot rose through the ranks and eventually became the head pilot in the company. Thanks to his experience, Zobayan frequently got the highest paying and celebrity clients, such as Kobe Bryant. It's unknown when exactly Zobayan started flying Kobe around, but it was for at least several years. But the pair's relationship soon went beyond merely professional. Over time, Kobe began exclusively requesting Zobayan to be his pilot whenever he had to travel. As the years went on, Kobe trusted his experience so much that he even allowed him to fly his children around without him present. In the year before the accident, Zobayan flew Kobe on several different occasions. People familiar with their relationship viewed it as a close friendship, and no one ever saw them fighting or arguing. So, if no one sabotaged the helicopter and the pilot was not an inside man for Big Pharma, what really happened that day? As mentioned previously, the weather conditions were poor that day. The visibility in the area was around 3 miles. The area where the helicopter crashed was known for bad visibility. A canyon to the south acted like a funnel, bringing adverse weather from the coast inland. This is confirmed by several cameras in the area, including one about 2 miles away that shows intense cloud cover 1 minute after the accident. The evidence shows that Zobayan, certified for visual flight rules only, navigated according to standard policies and procedures. As he made his way onto Route 101, he intended to stay below the clouds that were hovering around 1,000 feet. As he steered his helicopter toward the tricky spot along Route 101, he encountered near-zero visibility conditions. Relying on his training, Zobayan kept the helicopter on a steady course, wanting to go straight up and far above the clouds. The earlier weather report said clouds were at 2,400 feet, and he wanted to climb to 4,000 feet to be sure he could avoid them. But there was a problem. Because of his inexperience in flying with instruments combined with the sudden restricted visibility, Zobayan experienced a phenomenon known as spatial disorientation, or the leans. This is when your inner ear tricks you into thinking you are going one way, but really you're going the other way. This mistake is common, especially amongst inexperienced instrument pilots. And in the 10 years before this accident, there were nearly 200 similar incidents, with many believing the leans were responsible for them. As he was relying on intuition, Zobayan continued banking hard to the left since he felt the helicopter going right. He had lost spatial orientation because of the visibility, and then made the mistake of going down instead of up. Both of these factors occurred at the same time, which explains why Zobayan banked down and left instead of going straight up. It was this combination of poor weather conditions, a psychological phenomenon, and horrible luck that caused the death of Kobe Bryant and 8 others that day.